Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2026 Transit Service Plan, a virtual community meeting. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. We're going to give folks some time to come in. Okay. Um, We are, again, we're here at the 2026 Transit Service Plan Virtual Community Meeting. And again, I just want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us on tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started. I don't want to keep any of you too long tonight. We have a schedule for an hour, and I don't want to keep you all past that allotted time. But and again, thank you for being here on tonight. Okay. And I'm just going to go over our agenda for this evening. I welcome and introductions for myself and one of our panelists, Omar Perez. And then we're going to go over the virtual meeting etiquette and how to participate. And then we're going to have our staff presentation by Janice Soriano Ramos. And then we're going to have our Q&A session and leave time for some comments. And then we will close and then we'll talk about our next steps for this 2026 service plan. And tonight we have with us, again, myself, Manana Carter, and I'm a public communications specialist. We have Omar Perez, who's also a public communications specialist. Our presenter on this evening, Janice Soriano Ramos, who's a senior transportation planner and also the project manager. We have Stephen Chi, who's our transportation planner. Kermit Cuff, who's our transit scheduling manager. And then we have Sanjita Basnet, who is our planning intern. And tonight, we do know that most people know how to use Zoom. We've been using it for some time now, but in case you are new to Zoom, we'll just go over really quickly how to use it. Um, what we will be doing on tonight is if you have questions or if you have comments, we're going to ask you to put those questions and comments into our Q&A. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A. Put your questions in there, and then staff will go through and during the Q&A portion of our of our presentation on tonight, we'll go ahead and answer those questions for you. We do have another option, but tonight we're going to bypass that option unless you are on the phone and you cannot use the Q&A. If you are on the phone and you will be participating by phone only. If you have a comment or you have a question, we do ask that you press *9 to raise your hand, and then I will ask you to unmute yourself, and you press *6 to do that. Okay, and we do have a quick poll on tonight. I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. And if you could go through and answer the questions on that poll, I'll go ahead and give you all a couple of minutes to do so. You don't have to answer them all if you don't feel comfortable answering them. But if you can please answer those that you feel comfortable answering, we ask that you do that. Okay, and I will launch that now. Okay, I'm going to give about another 45 seconds. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Okay. Thank you all so much for taking the poll. We do appreciate the information. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. And I'm going to welcome Omar Perez, and he's going to give you all a little bit more information about VTA. Omar?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. So we'll talk a little bit about VTA's role here in Santa Clara County. Many folks don't know VTA does more than just provide light rail and bus services for the county. We also act as a funding conduit for local cities and other agencies here in the county. We also design and build transit facilities, highway improvement, and expand our light rail service. We also plan for congestion management and land use. You've seen maybe some of our TODs that recently broke ground at the Tomian Station. That is one of the projects that we also work on. And we also build, and own the BART to Silicon Valley infrastructure here in Silicon Valley. And if you can see there on your screen, the wheel kind of shows a little bit the overview of what VTA does more than, again, just providing our buses and our light rail service here in the county. This is a great tool and a great overview of what VTA does here in Santa Clara County.
Thank you, Omar. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. And then I will talk a little bit about why we are here on today. So for our community, we are here to for you to receive information about our 2026 proposed service changes and to provide an opportunity for you to ask questions and for you to also share your comments on the proposal. What VTA staff will do on this evening is we will explain the proposals and share your feedback that we received from you on tonight and throughout the month. We will share that feedback with our VTA board, and then we will use that feedback where it's possible for us to revise the plan. Um, as long as we have the available resources to do so. Okay. And now I'm going to turn it over to Janice Soriano Ramos, who again is our transportation manager. She manages this program, and we will hear from her, and then I will return when she is done giving you all the information about this year's or 2026 transit service plan. Janice.
Thanks so much, Moni, and appreciate it, Omar, for both of you for introducing us and for giving us an introduction about a little bit what VTA does. So as you can see, we cover a wide range of scope and projects for Santa Clara County. But today we are focused here on a very transit-related thing. Again, my name is Janice Soriano Ramos, and I think I've met a handful of you just based on who I see here in the room. And we're really here to talk about our annual transit service plans. And again, I really want to thank you all for spending a really nice, beautiful evening to learn about this. Before I get too deep into what we've got for 2026, I do want to walk back and seeing that there are some people who are not familiar with our transit service planning process. So this is a slide that basically describes what we cover each and every year with you all. A transit service plan essentially is what we do have planned for bus and light rail service for the following year. It describes everything from where our bus and light rail routes travel and stop, how often our buses and trains come, aka frequency, how early and late our service runs, early into the morning, late into the evening. We also refer to that as our service span. And by now, and especially in the past several years, you must be familiar with the fact that this really is a collaborative opportunity between VTA staff, our city stakeholders, riders. We very much partner with the cities on this as well. So we really want to make sure that each and every year, no matter how minute or how grand the changes that we're proposing for the following year, that you are all aware of it and you all have a stake in how that gets adopted by our board in the fall. I also saw that through the poll, we've got some new riders here, a wide gamut of people who also, dabble in taking transit throughout Santa Clara County, mixing and matching different commute modes. So before I jump in again to the 2026 plan, you may want to get a sense of what the rhyme and reason is anytime you look at our system maps. And listed here are different categories of service, from most frequent to least frequent service. Any of our routes that you see in red are rapid and frequent bus routes, with the exception of light rail, which is colored by blue, green, and orange, just as how they're named. And those three categories together are what form our frequent network. That's your show up and go service. It's fast, frequent, and reliable. It functions essentially 7 days a week, every 15 minutes on weekdays. Then you've got your local service. Those are all of your bus routes in blue. We've got a handful of those that are maybe not as frequent, may not run every day of the week, may just only run on the weekdays. but these are still really important neighborhood connections that we want to keep intact, just for our overall network and to make sure that the transfers are great and everyone is hitting their important destinations. And then finally, you have the express bus category, and these tend to be more peak period, commuter-oriented services that we run with the funding help of employer sponsors on these routes. So we've got 5 of those that run one direction in the morning peak period, and then the opposite direction in the afternoon. So that's just to give you a sense of how our network is structured. So I think any of you who have been following our annual service plans in recent years will notice we have different themes and different challenges that we face every time we create these proposals. And I say this every year is very different, right? And it really paints the picture for how we have these discussions with you all. This year, it happens to be a balancing act between how we can maintain our operating budget to what it is today, and balancing it with how we can continue to deliver reliable service to our riders. So on one side of the scale, here's what I mean by that. On one side of the scale, you may have heard as of last week that our board of directors approved VTA's budget for the next 2 fiscal years. And between our already very limited resources, our rising operating costs, our budget deficits as a result of the poor return on sales tax revenue that we've had this past year, and just overall economic uncertainty, we have been given that direction to keep our service levels the same, exactly the same as we've had them adopted last year. On the other side of the scale, of course, we want to continue meeting our obligation to you as riders. We want to deliver service you can count on, which, again, this is a balancing act. We will need to explore some trims to our service and also be conservative about how much service we're able to deliver next year. The big goals here were really to maintain our core transit service. We really worked hard with you all to recover our transit service back to pre-pandemic levels. We want to continue to carry as many riders as possible by keeping that service intact. On top of that, we want to continue arriving on schedule. We sometimes have challenges pulling out from our yards, and that's already been challenging to say the least. And I know there's unfortunate instances where some of you have missed out because we had to cancel a trip for that reason. And the biggest challenge I'd say here, if I'm being candid, is our traffic congestion. We continue to see it be on the rise, and where we're finding ourselves now is we're having to schedule in more service hours, deploy more buses, more than what we had been used to seeing in the past few years, just to be able to stick to our posted schedules. So that's just a little bit of context here. A lot of context tonight in today's discussion. So I really just want to put it in perspective today, just by showing you what today's service levels look like. And when we typically talk about service levels, sure, we talk about dollars, especially when it comes from a budgetary perspective, but in service planning, we really focus on, okay, how many service hours are we able to deliver on the road? That's our main metric for measuring service. So what does every hour of our vehicle spent on the road look like? This includes things like time from the yard all the way to the first stop of a route, any revenue time that is spent carrying riders on our bus and rail system, any layovers or any built-in break time for our operators, things like that. So just keeping those hours in mind, that's what you see here. If you compare how our scheduled service today, so that column there in bold, if you compare how our service today stacks up against what we got adopted for our 2025 plan by our board, you'll notice we're already well over. And that doesn't even include 2 routes where we have left to restore some of that service in order to make that 2025 service plan whole. So now, if we were to keep everything the same, if let's say we made no changes to the 2025 plan, you'll see that'll just put us even more over, roughly, 20,000 hours over or so. And that also doesn't include any buffer that we're building into our hours in order to account for how much more traffic might build in 2026. We all wish we could have a crystal ball when it comes to having that number exact, but this is not assuming that number, and we're already well over if we were to keep these service changes, or I'm sorry, the service plan as is. So finally, that brings us to the draft proposals that we're going to talk about tonight. And for those of you who are used to seeing our annual transit service planning process, you'll see this list is very slim. The changes we're proposing are very minimal this year. These 3 changes are really it. This is what staff is proposing as part of our draft plan. And in the next few slides, I will certainly go over what these changes look like in detail. So the first one is our Route 59, and this is a local route that runs 7 days a week. It serves our Bay Point station, serves parts of Alviso as well, heads down to Old Ironsides, also makes really great connections to the Santa Clara Transit Center, and then finally heads its way down towards the Valley Fair area, Stevens Creek, and that's where it turns around. It turns around, makes this kind of awkward looking turnaround at Stevens Creek and Saratoga. And what we're changing here from a frequency perspective, on weekends, we are going to make that every 60-minute route. Right now it's running at every 50 minutes, which I know is a typically difficult frequency to navigate, and it's not as intuitive. So we are going to adjust that to 60 minutes. And what that also allows us to do is adjust some hours so that we are able to accommodate a new turnaround on this Route 59. So on that second row here, you'll see that it'll more or less stay the same up until you approach Valley Fair using that route. It'll continue down Winchester and make several turns over to serve the Valley Medical Center. And we're actually working very closely with the county and VMC to ensure that will be a really useful connection and a doable turnaround. You'll see here as well that the changes we're proposing are cost neutral and cost the same as if we were to keep this route the same today. So here's a glimpse of a before and after, so to speak, of what the route would look like if we were to incorporate this change. As I mentioned, it makes this turnaround at Saratoga and Stevens Creek today, making several stops along the way. But with this proposal, we would simply have the route continue south on Winchester and use Moore Park to access the Valley Medical Center campus. And the details as to how this will turn around are still being worked out. We, again, as I mentioned, our scheduling team is working very closely with the hospital to identify a safe and reliable bus stop in that area. But this will more or less be how this bus will access the campus. The second proposal that is in our draft plan is the Express Route 121. And as I had mentioned earlier, we have a handful of express routes that do rely on employer partnerships and sponsorships to continue operating the route. And with this route running 3 trips in the morning north and 3 trips in the afternoon back south, it is a pretty lengthy route, despite only having a few routes operated every weekday. Since we no longer have sponsorships on this route, that was one of the terms in order to continue operating our express routes through our service partnership program. Since those partnerships have dropped, we will have to propose that we discontinue this route altogether. We also had noticed over time that ridership hasn't been performing to what it used to be during the pandemic. So with this proposal, just to show you how significant of a savings this would be, it would save the agency roughly $540,000 per year. And it takes about 3 buses to operate this route alone. And when we say this will incur savings of 3 buses, that allows us to use those 3 buses and deploy them elsewhere in the system where it may need that extra help to combat the traffic conditions that might be slowing it down. And then finally, the third proposal we have here is a proposal for the Rapid Route 523. This one is not so much a proposal to change what it is from today, but the reason why we're highlighting this is because in our 2025 service plan, we had it adopted as a 15-minute weekday route. So the proposal here today is to leave the route as is at running at every 20 minutes on weekdays. So again, you'll see no changes proposed for 2026 compared to today, but whether it's 15 minutes or 20-minute frequencies, you'll see just in that green box there how significant of a savings that is. Just by running it less frequently at every 20 minutes, we may be able to save just over $2 million a year by running it less frequently, and 4 buses would be able to deploy it elsewhere. So this slide is really just to sum it all up. This is a budget neutral plan. We intend to keep the same overall service levels from today, but in order to combat what we've been seeing as far as traffic congestion goes, we do have to leave in quite a bit of a buffer, something that we've been endearingly calling traffic inflation hours. We really want to make sure that we can deliver on the service we promised to you. And so by doing that, by being able to trim back on some of these proposals, we hope to be able to do that. Next couple of slides here to wrap us up. While we are talking primarily about transit service, the story certainly doesn't stop with our annual service plans. We, of course, will continue to have these conversations with you about how we plan to tweak our service over the next few years, but fully recognizing that both the 2026 plan and the 2027 plan are likely not going to be able to accommodate any huge service increases. But we do intend to keep the structure around because we do have a visionary network that we are very excited to implement and work towards and find additional funding for. So consider this the building blocks towards growing our service over time. It'll just take a pause in the next 2 years. The visionary network, of course, that's something I had already just mentioned, but for those of you who aren't familiar with our visionary network, we had a board adopted vision to increase our service levels from today to roughly 80% more. That translates into having one day a 10-minute frequent network, as well as other frequency and span improvements throughout our network. Finally, the big one, I think, the big takeaway here is as we're trying to continue delivering fast, frequent, reliable service to you, we also have a group of planners who are really hard at work in working with our cities and ensuring that they can help us and partner with us in speeding up our transit service. And so these take in the form of several capital projects, anything from transit signal priority, dedicated bus lanes, looking into non-cash fare programs that would help us more efficiently run our service, since it would take less time with non-cash fare forms of payment. And then finally, there's of course light rail as well to be worked on. I know we didn't talk a lot about light rail today, mostly because we don't have any proposals to change light rail at this time, but there's definitely work to be done to speed up our light rail service, anything from grade separating it in some parts of our network to even something that's seemingly as small but very significant as intersection improvements to get that going. I will leave us here on this slide. This slide is really essentially outlining our how we will continue our engagement process. We will engage through mid-July or so. But we, of course, still have several events coming up. If you all are interested in continuing the conversation, we have a handful of in-person appearances at various pop-ups, community meetings. We've got another community meeting next week. We also have office hours if you'd like to engage with us on a virtual level like this, minus the presentation, of course, since this will be recorded and posted for those who are not able to join us tonight. So with that, I am happy to wrap this up and open it up for Q&A for those of you who have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Janice. We do have a couple of questions that are in Q&A. If you have questions, we do ask that you please put them in the Q&A so that we can discuss them. So we have a couple questions that are open, and I'll go ahead and start with those first. Well, actually, you know what? I'm gonna go to our answered questions. I want to give Denise a little bit of time to get some water and relax her throat for just a second. And I'm going to go through questions that were asked and answered, and then we'll go through to the open questions. And then I'll also give you all time to put questions in the chat as well. So we do have two questions that were asked and answered, and I'll read the question. The first question, hold on just a second, scroll up, was asked by Greg, and it's, are there more light rail rehabilitation shutdowns that are going to happen in 2026? And it was answered by Kermit, and that is yes. So there will be a couple of shutdowns in July and later in the fall in the Allen Rock area. We do not have any exact dates yet. And our second question was from Kyle, or question / comment. And he says the light rail needs a major revamp. VTA plans to survey riders to determine where they may want to go as a way to surgically expand light rail, similar to how the 61 expanded due to community input. Routes such as 522, the 522, and the 23 and 523 do more work than all of the light rail combined. VTA has buses doing light rail work where it should be the opposite. And that was answered by Stephen. And we do not have any immediate plans for a survey regarding light rail expansion, but we will note that suggestion down for review. Thank you. Okay, and now we will go to our open questions. And our question is from Kyle, and it's VTA is adding highway express lanes. How will the revenues gained from tolls be used by VTA? VTA needs more reliable and stable form of income separate from sales tax, volatile. And Janice?
Sure, I'll take that question. Thanks, Kyle. I certainly agree that we need to look at more versatile forms of revenue. We need to diversify how we're gaining revenue, particularly for transit operations, which certainly is a harder pool of money to gain revenue for. Especially when we have things like our visionary network that we want to implement someday. We do have to get creative, anything from express lane tolls to, just throwing it out there, potential transportation network company or TNC taxes through Uber and Lyft, TOD revenue. These are the types of things that we can really explore as we start to think about how we grow our service. Some will be more volatile than others. Like you've mentioned, Kyle, sales tax certainly is one of them. But the more we diversify the pool of money we get towards transit operations, the better off we'll be. And on top of that, I will say, with the highway express lanes, I think, your question is really around how will we use it? And in my conversations with our highway and toll engineers, I know that firsthand, the revenues are typically used towards maintaining the, the actual implementation of the express toll systems first, but they certainly have hinted at me that over time, as they gain that revenue towards maintenance, that the rest of it could potentially serve to grow our transit service. So I think there's certainly incentive there, and that's the beauty of VTA being both a transit operator and a CMA. We're able to see how these projects can seamlessly work together to support each other. So thanks for that question. Are there any other questions here?
Talking. Hello.
Oh, there you are.
I am sorry. I am just talking away and I'm muted. Okay. So the next question is from Kyle, and this looks more like a comment. I'll go ahead and read that. And the bus lanes are nice, but an important thing to remember with bus lanes is that if they are not made explicitly clear what they are, drivers will use them as a normal traffic lane. Bus lanes must be painted a different color that makes it clear to drivers that they are not supposed to use the lane. First and Second Street have bus lanes, but traffic uses them as parking and travel and often block the bus stops. Okay, thank you, Kyle. We'll note that. Thank you. We appreciate the feedback. And the next one is from Kyle again, and it's a question: what is the timeline for the new light rail vehicle procurement, or I guess the light rail vehicle procurement? Are we able to get a preview of what they may look like?
So unfortunately, we don't have staff from our light rail and capital planning team on deck tonight, so we don't have oversight of that timeline, but we're happy to pass along your question.
Thank you, Shanice. And we have another question from Christina, and it's, will VTA hire more fare inspectors? So many people get on for free.
So I'm not aware from a hiring perspective how filled up we are on the number of fare inspectors we expect to have on our staff. I do know that they were in the midst of hiring more fare inspectors, but given our approved budget over the next 2 years, we are in a hiring chill of sorts where we will not be opening any new positions. So that may mean no longer opening additional fare inspectors to hire, but there may be some backfill. I just don't know. I just don't have oversight on that question, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the question as well. Thank everyone for their questions. Thank you. Okay. And our next question is from Greg, and it's, are there any new funding opportunities being explored that may change the bleak outlook?
Other than the ones that I've mentioned that we would explore for expanding service, I think one I forgot to mention was that VTA, if you do follow our board meetings, VTA is exploring a regional measure to fund transit. So that would include other transit agencies throughout the Bay Area who would also benefit from this. And I think collectively, our agencies would want to explore that, since a lot of our transit networks are interconnected and rely on each other. So I would say that's one that is for sure being explored in the coming at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And the next question is from Troy, and it's, is there any opportunity to time light rail transfers to Caltrain and BART? There are times that the blue line misses Caltrain at Tamian by 4 minutes. And Kermit would like to answer this question. Kermit?
Yeah, it's a complicated, the light rail schedule is very complicated, and we have a lot of connections in a lot of places. There's like the Green Line. We connect with Caltrain at Tamian, but the bigger connections are at Diridon with the Green Line, and then at Mountain View with the Orange Line. So, and then we connect with BART, of course, light rail and BART at Milpitas. So we take all of the BART and Caltrain schedules and map out the best possible scenario for like the orange line, the blue line, and the green line that'll make the most of the connections. Like of the maybe 20 connections, we try to get 15 of them good. But right now, like at Mountain View, it's really working well at Mountain View with a nice consistent Caltrain schedule they have, and with our 15-minute service. But so it's hard to make everything work. And the blue line at Tomian, since there are a lot less people transferring on that one compared to like in Mountain View and at Diridon, it's like you just can't make them all work. But it is, we are working closely with Caltrain and BART. They provide their schedules well in advance. We get to adjust ours accordingly. So, but it's a good question though. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Kermit. Our next question, it's anonymous. It says, I recently started taking the Express 121 route due to the heavy commute traffic and find it very convenient. I'd like to ask my company if they might help sponsor this route. Please provide contact information to start the conversation.
So I appreciate this comment. If you could email customer.service@vta.org, and they will pass it on to the rest of the team here. I do realize that with the Express 121 being previously funded by two sponsors, that it is, a valuable service to several employers in the area, whether it's from Moffett Park or Great America. And while we're happy to have that conversation with whichever company might be entertaining it, we may have to look into when that would be possible to implement back up. And as we're exploring this really challenging budgetary cycle over the next 2 years, we do have to explore some, we do have to explore how we trim service at this given time. And as much as we'd love to explore it in the next year or two, we want to have that conversation, but I think we really need to set that expectation, how critical it is that we explore, I guess, the fewer impact changes that we're proposing as possible. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind emailing our customer service team, and they'll pass that on to the team that you see here tonight, as well as, others who we report to as well. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you for the question, and thank you, Janine. Okay. Our next question is from Daniel. And it says, other than the 523, have all of the 2025 plan changes been implemented to date? And Kermit would like to answer this question. Kermit?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, basically all of the changes have been implemented except for one, which is on Route 89. We had proposed due to very low ridership on the route, to reduce the peak hour frequency from approximately 20 minutes to like 40 minutes, like it is in the middle of the day. We held off making that change due to the request of the Stanford Research Park, since Caltrain had, recently improved their service. They wanted to see if the ridership would go up in the meantime, kind of give it a chance to work. And that one really, the ridership really hasn't gone up. Maybe, a slight amount, but not enough to warrant the 20-minute service. So that's one change that we haven't made yet, that we'll be doing in the October sign up, October 27th. But other than that, correct me if I'm wrong, Janice, but other than that, the rest of the 25 changes have been implemented. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Kermit. Okay, and the next one is is anonymous as well. And the question is there a plan to revisit a direct connection of Deer Dawn, the main transit node for the county to Santa Clara Valley Medical Center and nearby O'Connor Hospital? The loss of the express shuttle service has had a significant impact on both employees and patients attempting to access care. The current workaround requires passengers to make a rail to bus exchange, walk long distances, and cross a multi-lane roadway to make the transfer. Not only are the transfers poorly timed, but expecting passengers looking to connect to healthcare to make this long transit trip despite the short distance between Deer Dawn and two of the county's largest hospital does not seem to be in the best interest of county residents. And Kermit.
Well, I can provide a little bit of insight. I mean, the SCVMC shuttle that we operated was running virtually empty, AM and PM. It was when we lined up all the routes we had, it was on the very bottom of the list, and we lost similar to the 121, we lost the funding contribution from the county, so it was really hard to justify keeping it at that low level. But that's one of the reasons that the 59 is being proposed to be extended to VMC, because that's most of the employees are coming like south on Caltrain or coming in from ACE and Capital Corridor, and this way they can get off at Santa Clara, take the 59 to VMC without having to go to Diridon. I understand that doesn't work for everybody, but that's why we're trying to make that change one of the main reasons we're trying to make that change on the 59.
And if I could add as well, I would say this option with Route 59, although it doesn't make that direct connection to Diridon, as Kermit's mentioned, it connects to Santa Clara Transit Center, which also has ACE and Caltrain to catch there. And if you think about it, it could potentially be a much more convenient service for folks, since this is a two-way route. It serves both directions. It runs much more frequently than what the VMC had operated. It was just only, when the VMC was around, it was only 7 trips in the morning from Diridon to VMC, nothing in the middle of the day, and then 10 trips in the evening back to Diridon. So there's certainly much more flexibility there. The more frequent the services, if it runs in both directions, then I'd say it's actually a much more of a benefit for patients, even because the Valley Medical Center shuttle was just focused on matching the busiest work shifts of the day shift workers at VMC.
Okay. Thank you, Kermit and Denise. Our next questions from is anonymous as well. Why don't we have shuttles from Santa Clara, Lawrence, Sunnyvale to North San Jose tech areas?
I can take that question. So we get this question a lot about why doesn't VTA just run circulator shuttles or shuttles that essentially serve that last connection between a train station and several of our busiest employer areas. And what it ultimately comes down to is we really want to ensure that our transit service is serving as many types and mixes of land uses as possible. And, I won't necessarily say that the Lawrence Station area is just businesses. I acknowledge that our cities, both Santa Clara and Sunnyvale, are really making steadfast change and building more housing in the area. But we certainly want to see that development grow first. We want to be able to see that mix of both residences and businesses before we crank up the service in those areas. That's what really makes ridership on our routes succeed, is when you can serve as many destinations as possible with an overlap of routes. And we acknowledge that there's potential there. I think it's not quite primed yet for transit. You want to also be able to make it walkable. And I think the stepping stone towards that, what we're seeing now, is a lot more exploration of microtransit services that serve these areas. Sunnyvale, for instance, has a new Perry Park Ride microtransit shuttle that they've opened, or the city has opened, and it's been running for the first few months now, and that seems to be a really successful way to make some of those commuter trips work.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you, Janice. Our next question is from Audrey, and it's reducing the coverage and losing routes, reducing the service plan equals more congestion, equals less efficiency, equals less use, equals more congestion, equals higher costs. The far North County, Palo Alto, is in a death spiral of generations no longer riding. Most of the community has no access to VTA besides El Camino. This creates a whole community that does not have local service and thus does not take public transit into consideration. And they will go all throughout Santa Clara County. So they will add traffic inflation to all of the rest of the county. Is there a plan to consider adding more effective routes that include Palo Alto?
I would say absolutely in the long term. I think what we really envision for the Visionary Network is to be able to ramp up our entire network in frequency. So going back to that, if we have a frequent route that runs at every 15 minutes today, we really want to see that run at every 10 minutes. Any local routes would be bumped up to every 20 to 30 minutes rather than from every 30 to 60 minutes, so on and so forth. That's really what the core of our improvements are planned in for the Visionary Network. But also in the Visionary Network are we've allocated some plans to explore what it would look like to serve new transit markets. And that, of course, is it has to be a dance with what sort of land use developments the cities have. So again, we work very closely with the cities. We keep in close tandem with their general plans and how their land use development plans closely match what they've got in their planned in their general plan overall. So certainly there's that opportunity to work up on that, but it takes more than just VTA to determine where those routes go. It also takes a conversation with our city staff as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Janice. And thank you for the question as well, Audrey. Our next question is anonymous again. Are there other ways to get sponsorship for the Express 121, or maybe reduce services from 3 to 2?
It was breaking up a little bit. Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Sure. No worries, no worries. Are there other ways to get sponsorship for the Express 121, or maybe reduce services from 3 to 2?
Again, we're certainly open to discussing what those possibilities are. And, I appreciate the mindfulness about maybe even like walking back on how many trips we operate. But it ultimately depends on our budget and how much we would have to decrease for the service plan. And at the same time, it would also depend on how much a employer would be willing and able to contribute. And I think if you recall on the slide that I popped up for the 121, it's certainly not chump change. It's almost like a $500,000 just to run the 121 with just those 3 trips in the morning and the afternoon. And I think in order for us to be conservative about how many buses we're able to save and allocate elsewhere, it would have to be it would take several conversations to get there. But we're happy to have that conversation as we plan in the long term. And although we are in this tight budget era over the next 2 years, who knows what the sales tax revenues will look like next year? And also, who knows what sort of improvements we may have on the overall speed of our buses. I mentioned those speed and reliability projects earlier, and the more we're able to tighten up how quickly our service runs, the more cost effective our service will be. So I don't want this to be a doom and gloom conversation forever. I do just want to set the expectation that it will be a tough next 2 years. And I think there's room to have longer term conversations while we navigate these next 2 years.
Thank you, Janice, and thank you for the question. Our next question is from Daniel, and it's with hiring freezes, how can VTA ensure service reliability without so many canceled trips?
I know that's something that we struggle with even from a staffing perspective, balancing how much service we're able to carry out versus how many operators we have to carry out that service. And perhaps Kermit's a better person to somewhat address this question, but I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Kermit, related to how we try to plan service in tandem with what operations is able to share with us with their hiring progress over time. Maybe there's a little bit that you could dig into there.
Exactly. That, yeah, we have
Mhm.
quarterly meetings with operations, both the rail and the bus side, to find out exactly how many operators they have, how many retiring, and basically get the projection of how many operators they have, and to make sure that our service levels align with that. Now this hiring freeze doesn't help. I mean, they're supposed to keep up with, I know Janice and I don't have much control over, the hiring and things, but they are supposed to keep up with the number of operators that we have, but it's a tricky thing. What the big wild card is the um operator availability, or like how many operators don't show up for work for whatever reason, that's what's really harder to get. We know how many operators it takes to to like per day that we need and all this stuff. That's really easy, right? We know how many operators we need, but how many operators are actually going to show up? How much of an extra board do we need, like a cushion? Do we need? That's the part that varies, and that's tricky, which is why we meet with operations every time, just to make sure we're not over promising.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I'm gonna just do a time check here because it's almost 7 o'clock. We do have a couple of more questions left, so I'm gonna close the chat to any new questions. And I have 3 questions left to be answered. Um, this question is from Troy, and it says, I noticed that escalators are going down a lot. Is there any way to save repair costs via mitigation, like maybe shelter parts of the escalator?
If we would have to pass that one along to a different group, that's kind of out of the scope of this meeting. We can certainly pass that along to the appropriate department.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kermit. This next question is from Alicia, and it's the employees can figure out the workaround. I would argue the vulnerable population the county serves struggle the most. Okay, thank you. That was a comment. And thank you, Alicia, for that comment. We will note that as well. Okay. Okay. And then our last question is from Jose. And it says, I would like to see dates added to the PDF for Route times that you can download and larger route maps that I can download. Also, the BTA website complaint form always gives me errors when I try to use it. Okay. Thank you for that feedback. It's appreciated. Okay. Okay, thank you all. That is, we have come to the end of our presentation and also the end of our time. You know, we don't want to keep anyone past 7 o'clock. Again, here on the screen are as the plans for moving forward. We will continue to discuss the draft proposal with the community for in June and July. In August, we will revise the plan. In September and October, we will adopt a final plan. And then in January 2026, we will begin the service. Again, we will be having an in-person community meeting at the Quinlan Community Center in Cupertino, and that's going to be on next Tuesday, June the 17th. That is from 6 to 7:30. We'll also have virtual staff office hours on Thursday, the 26th, and that'll be from 12 to 1. And then we do have a pop-up, and we will be tabling at a few events, Juneteenth, Sunnyvale Farmers Market, downtown Customer Service Center, and then we will be at our Independence Day event at Lake Cunningham. If you want to share feedback, feel free to send that to customer.service@vta.org. And we will again continue to take that feedback throughout the month of July. And again, if you would like, we could always come out and see us at any of the opportunities that we have available. I'd just like to take the time before we end to thank you again for coming out and for spending time with us tonight. I always say that you could have chosen to do anything with your evening, but you chose to be here with us, and we do not take that for granted, and we thank you. So now we'll go ahead and give you back the rest of your evening. It is beautiful outside. Go out and enjoy some of the sunshine and the weather, because I think it's cooled down now as well. And again, we thank you, and we hope to see you out at some of our other events or even at our in-person meeting in Cupertino. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.